Chapter 5. Levitttown, New York. Summer 1963. Midday. At the same time, 17-year-old Donald Trump was in Queens preparing for his senior year at the New York Military Academy. A few miles away, 12-year-old Bill Reilly was playing on the streets in one of the largest housing developments in America, Levitttown. But this book is not about you, Bill. It's about me. Developers Abe Levitt and his sons William and Alfred eventually built 17,447 small homes in Nassau County and marketed them to working-class people, many of them veterans who wanted to get out of New York City and or start families in houses they could afford. Affordable housing, that's important. Levitttown was about 20 miles east of the city and approximately 15 miles east of Jamaica Estates, where Fred Trump was competing with the Levitts for the housing dollar. We are very competitive, watch out. The elder Trump and the Levitts had a lot in common, including constructing military dwellings in Virginia and possessing the know-how to build homes quickly and economically. In 1951, my mother and father bought the O'Reilly family home at 11 Page Lane in Levitttown for $8,000. That's a good deal. They lived there the rest of their lives. That part of Levitttown eventually shifted to a Westbury post office address. The other thing Fred Trump and the Levitts agreed upon was a marketing strategy. In 1963, they were reluctant to sell to African Americans. William Levitt openly admitted it. As a Jew, I have no room in my heart for racial prejudice, he said, but the plain fact is that most whites prefer not to live in mixed communities. That attitude may be wrong morally, and someday it may change. I hope it will. It changed big time. But William Levitt, his father, and his brother did little to foster such a change. They made millions selling houses to whites, so they sold houses to whites, despite President John F. Kennedy signing an executive order in 1962 banning racial discrimination in homes built, purchased, or financed with federal assistance. If racial profiling was in, that meant buyers using the GI Bill were out. The Levitts tried to fight the federal order, but lost. Good. Eventually, they cashed out, selling their company in 1964 to the International Telephone and Telegraph Corporation for $90 million. Wow. Racial prejudice has a long history in southern New York, which includes Queens. Yes, it did. On July 4th, 1924, a reported 30,000 people attended a Ku Klux Klan rally in New Jersey during the Democratic National Convention, which was being held in Manhattan at the time. The gathering would later earn a sarcastic reference as a Klan bake. In many neighborhoods, real estate agents and mortgage companies simply would not deal with blacks. As the civil rights movement picked up steam behind Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in the mid-1960s, the feds became more aggressive in bringing housing discrimination cases. But locally, the fix was in. It was very tough for black Americans to buy into white neighborhoods in Queens and the two counties to the east. I think there was an episode of All in the Family that dealt with that. It was all about money and prejudice, of course. In 1963, Levitttown, the population was 1/3 Catholic, 1/3 Jewish, and 1/3 Protestant. But it was nearly 100% Caucasian. If blacks moved in, some bigoted whites would move out, and home prices would drop. How stupid. I agree, it's stupid. In Manhattan, the ruthless real estate people would actually buy row houses in white neighborhoods and then turn around and sell them to blacks, hoping for white flight, so other properties in the area could then be bought up cheap. These people were called blockbusters, not to be confused with the video store in the 1990s. Those fleeing integrated city neighborhoods would often move to the white suburbs, where business was brisk for the Levitts, Fred Trump, and many others. In addition, white-only housing enclaves appreciated faster in value than mixed places. Total it all up, and you had a perfect storm of real estate discrimination. Yes, indeed. Back then, bias against blacks was called good business by just about everybody in the white real estate world. How stupid and morally wrong. Few challenged the rigged system. To understand Queens and Levitttown post-World War II, you must know the power that white ethnicity held. My friends were mostly Irish, Italian, and Jewish. We all pretty much got along, although Hebrew school was a problem. Our stickball games were regularly interrupted because the Jewish guys departed around 4:30 on selected weekdays. You gotta do what you gotta do. Like children all over the world, the Levitttown kids aped their parents. So many Irish kids didn't like England. The Italians didn't like anybody except other Italians. The Jewish guys didn't say much, but tended to be more liberal than the Irish and Italian kids. But we all liked sports, and I was a huge Willie Mays fan. Even though Willie had moved to San Francisco from New York in 1958, he was still tremendous to me. The giant center fielder was a legend in Harlem and revered in Levitttown as well. Good player, good player. On those occasions, when I heard a kid disparage blacks, I'd point to Willie Mays. That pretty much stopped the blather. The power of Willie Mays. On those occasions, when I heard a kid... Oh, wait a minute, I already read that, didn't I? Yes, you did. The truth is, my crew never saw or discussed black people at all. They lived miles away. There was no interaction between the races. I never heard my parents speak about African Americans. They didn't say anything bad because they didn't say anything at all. My father might hammer white ethnic groups once in a while, but never blacks. My mother liked everybody, but her mother didn't approve of blacks, even though she did not know any. I once asked my grandmother why she occasionally spoke harshly about African Americans. She had no answer. Big shock. I then asked if she had ever spoken with one. She said, no, she just didn't like them. I finally figured it out. She was afraid. She watched the local New York City news and saw blacks routinely being arrested on the tube. She led an insulated life in a white neighborhood where everyone thought as she did. Strangers of color were dangerous to her. That's wrong. By the way, when I told that story on the Radio Factor, I was branded a racist by the far-left extremist movement that uses race as a club to injure its perceived ideological enemies, and obviously despicable practice. Very despicable. Very, very, very despicable. I can safely say that most white families in my Levitttown neighborhood had the same experience that I did regarding black Americans. That is, no experience. And apparently, that extended to the Trump family in Queens. No one is immune. As we flew high above the East Coast on Air Force One, I brought the subject up with the president. Of course you would. Was race ever an issue or a discussion point in the Trump household? Literally, it wasn't an issue. It probably was for many, but it wasn't for this family. It was never an issue, and I wasn't exposed to it in a tremendous way. My father was very open-minded. I can actually say he was a man that didn't see the color of skin. Yet he was accused by some newspapers of being anti-black, not selling real estate to blacks. Yeah, you'd have a building in a certain area, and those areas were very different then. You would have white areas. You'd have African American areas. It was a different kind of city then. You'd have white buildings and black buildings all throughout the city. There was segregation in the city. It was a societal segregation. So race wasn't a big topic of conversation. Race was rarely a topic if ever. I can't even remember talking about it. But I will tell you, in my family, and this goes for me, the color of skin was not a factor. And that was true for my father. Once again, it is hard to nail down what Fred Trump was thinking in terms of racial justice. Evidence suggests his business plan overrode any wider view of the issue, but that's just speculation. What I can say for certain is that in 30 years, I have never heard Donald Trump say anything negative about a group of people, black or otherwise. I never did. And I'm making that statement about a man who uses negativity like a fly swatter. Oh yes, watch out for me. He'll verbally crush perceived individual or media opponents, but at least in my presence, he has never slurred anyone using race. Neither had, neither will. The hate Trump media has branded the president a racist and repeats the vile charge on a regular basis. And in fact, there are two racially charged situations regarding Donald Trump that deserve a hearing. In July 1972, Fred Trump's organization, Trump Management, owned about 14,000 apartments throughout Queens and Brooklyn. One day, a black woman applied for housing at the Shorehaven Apartments in Brooklyn. She was told that no vacancies existed. A short time later, a white woman approached the same Trump-owned building with the same request. She was shown 2 unoccupied units. Both women were undercover activists. More than a year later, the Justice Department filed a civil rights suit against Trump Management, charging that it had violated the Fair Housing Act of 1968. At the time, 26-year-old Donald Trump was president of the company, his father, chairman. The Trumps fought the case hard, asserting they had not knowingly done anything wrong. They hired the notorious Roy Cohn, who had been counsel to Senator Joseph McCarthy, to defend them, and a bitter legal brawl began. 2 years later, a settlement was reached. The Trumps agreed to become more compliant with the Fair Housing Act and paid for newspaper advertisements telling minorities they were welcome to rent at Trump properties. There was no financial settlement and no admission of guilt. Both sides claimed victory. We always win. The second highly charged race controversy, one that has angered many African Americans, is the so-called birther accusation lodged against Barack Obama. Oh, here we go with this one. The allegation is that the former president was not born in the United States, that his Hawaii-issued birth certificate is a fraud. To put this stupid theory to rest, my staff investigated this charge circa 2008. We found that 2 Honolulu newspapers, The Advertiser and the Star Bulletin, ran birth announcements for baby Barack shortly after his birth on August 4th, 1961. Now, that is impossible to fake or contrive. Barack was born in Honolulu, period. But Donald Trump continued to question President Obama's birth certificate long after the issue should have been buried. I told Donald in his face on national TV that the conspiracy was total BS. Far too late, Mr. Trump issued a statement saying he had changed his mind, that he now believed Barack Obama's birth certification was real. It was. But no apology. Why should I apologize? That situation is still a source of bitterness in many African American precincts, despite the fact that the Trump economy is beneficial to blacks in general. Oh yes, it is. Polls show that President Trump's support among African Americans remains tepid, to say the least. Most blacks hate the birther thing. So, why did Donald Trump do it? Perhaps the best analysis comes from his son and close advisor, Donald Trump Jr. He'll settle this. I really scolded him for the birther stuff. I thought that was mean-spirited and unnecessary. It's the way he fights. He will fight hard and push back. That's exactly what I do. And I've been doing it for 4 years for you, the American people. But why did he do that? He wasn't running against Obama. Why did he even bring the issue up and risk being called a racist? Listen, I don't think accusations that are nonsense mean anything to him. No, they don't. I mean, he can dish it out and take it with the best of them and actually enjoy some of that. I think he's seen and learned that the other side is not going to give him any quarter for admitting something. He would just rather move on and ignore it. Yes, I would. There's no point. Did you ever pull him aside and say, Dad, the Obama birther stuff, that's not a winner? I think we had conversations about some of those things, but he has an innate ability to understand things through a different lens that I don't think anyone else has. So I questioned something, But I don't second guess because there's always a method to the madness with him. Oh, yes, there is. At least that much I'll admit. The method was this. Donald Trump used the bogus birther issue to galvanize the support of those who despise President Obama. As he did with illegal immigration, Trump inflated an issue to gain approval from a select audience. No other Republican candidate swam in the waters of controversy like Donald Trump. He quickly separated himself from the pack with his outrageous claim about the birth certificate and became the anti-Obama candidate. Is that racist? There is evidence that it was a pure political play, not designed to denigrate skin color. Ha ha ha! I'm not a racist. But millions of Americans of all colors do not see it that way. In fact, an argument can be made that by questioning Barack Obama's nationality, you are actually denigrating his race. To this day, the debate continues to rage. It's so stupid. President Obama put forth the audacity of hope. President Trump replaced of hope with the audacity of me. And the audacity worked. Against all odds, he's the president. So get over it. Back in the summer of '64, little did Donald Trump or anyone else know that his personal journey to the White House would soon begin when he started college. It was an ominous time, with America still suffering from the assassination of its young president. Added to that was a distant fire just beginning to get out of control. Vietnam. Here we go.